Welcome to Patriot to the Core. I'm Thad Forrester. This podcast exists because of my little brother, Mark Forrester. He was angered by the attacks on 9/11, so he joined the military to help rid the world of terrorists. On September 29, 2010, he was killed on his first deployment. From his death notification to the dignified transfer ceremony, his viewing, funeral, and subsequent memorials, I was amazed at the new world of warriors we met. These patriots have become close to our family and been huge supports. They stood out because of their willingness to voluntarily fight evil. They believed in freedom. Because of their actions, I started this podcast to interview great Americans who serve their country and communities. Thank you for tuning in. So, Joe, you were one of the early guys in Afghanistan.
Yes, sir. Yep. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you were there. Well, I guess first of all, let's set the stage because I want to get to this, what all you did over a period of days, but when did you get there and why were you at least initially there?
Certainly. So we're going to go all the way back to 2001 on September 11th when we were all at the team room, roughly 9 a.m. Eastern time, when the first plane struck the tower. And we were out for a jog, and one of the PJs grabbed a team vehicle and flagged us all down. And we went back to the team room looking at the TV, perplexed, like, how could this happen? Because as a controller, combat controller, we're all air traffic controllers first. You're right. That was our bread and butter, all FAA trained air traffic controllers. So we're just questioning, how could this have happened as the second plane impacts the second building? And then we knew for sure that this was a terrorist act, that this was deliberate. And then we knew very quickly we'd be on our way somewhere. So we were at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, as part of the Joint Special Operations Command, my squadron, the 24th Special Tactics Squadron. But the other squadrons as well across the country and world were probably also getting ready simultaneous as well. You know, we had a counterterrorism mission that we were bred and trained for. And so we knew that we would be getting over quickly. So to answer your question, from September 11th, we had boots on the ground prior to October 19th, but October 19th of 2001 is probably the good start date. That was the first date of our airborne operations. Then on your previous podcast with Mike LaMonica and Kyle Stanbro, you talked about their airborne mission into Mullah Omar's compound. At the same time, my team was inserting into the Panjshir Valley of northern Afghanistan as part of the Northern Alliance team, linking up with the Central Intelligence Agency.
So at this time, well, let's see, September 11th, were you clean shaven?
Oh, yes. At the time we were. And so on any given day, we were in a variety of conditions. And so we had 3 squadrons, and we were paired as a sister team across Rangers, SEALs, and the most elite Army Special Forces team. And so we would either be in a pre-alert, an alert, or a component training cycle. So depending on those, we would be prepared for, a variety of actions. At the time, I was on a team that was known as Advanced Force Operations. We called it AFO at the time. It has a different moniker now. And the AFO team idea is to get there early to set the conditions for follow-on forces to do the business. And those follow-on forces could be a variety of things. And like Mike LaMonica had spoken about in that podcast from a couple years ago, is that they jumped in first, were ready to receive the airplanes and the remainder of the troops. And so there's always somebody probably, early there, taking a peek, which goes all the way back to Coach Carney when he set the conditions for the Desert One landing back in Iran in late 1979, early 1980.
Okay. So by the time you got to country, and I know this is kind of simple questions to most, but
Sure.
to me, it's little things that I'm curious about. By the time October 19th comes around, did you have facial hair?
Yes. Yeah. We the second that we knew that we were going to get tasked, we just started to grow our beards out because that's right. And the reason that is, I mean, on one hand, it's cool. My unit had relaxed grooming standards anyway. It's interesting. I've got a picture when post event when we received the vice president at our compound, and my hair was very long and I had a pretty shaggy mustache, and my commander was like, "Joe, you got to do something with that." And I'm like, "Sir, I can. I'm getting ready to go. I'm going back over for another, hoo-yah." So yes, we had relaxed grooming standards, which means we didn't typically wear a military uniform. Our hair was definitely over our ears. We had our beards, not so much beards, but mustaches were out of rags. But then we started to grow our beards because we knew that the people that we were going to be meeting with, the Northern Alliance, culturally, having a beard is that's what men do there, and we wanted to make sure that when they first met us, that we were on equal footing.
And then once you were in country, what kind of clothes did you wear at that time?
So interesting piece for my team, and we'll get to our mission set and why we were there initially, is we wore civilian clothes because we were chopped over to the Central Intelligence Agency. So at this point, there's a way to do business where the CIA was already forward. They were already making liaison. As a matter of fact, they never stopped with the liaison mission, even after we had left Afghanistan, when we were supporting them when they were fighting the Soviets in the 80s. So the Soviets had invaded Afghanistan and stayed there for quite a few years, and we had an effort, the United States, to feed the Northern Alliance, and so our group all wore civilian clothes with no military markings. As
Okay.
a matter of fact, we carried AK-47s instead of the traditional M16 or M4 type of rifle,
Why was that?
just so we could blend in better.
Huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
we wore their garb, we wore their hats, we wore their neckerchiefs, and carried their guns.
Why were you there? Was your mission changed, and what happened? 'Cause I know there was a situation with some missionaries, and I'm gonna throw this out there. This may not even have anything to do with you, but you had the American trader John Walker Lynn that was and then American CIA Johnny Michael Spann, who I've
Yeah,
had his dad on the show for two
yes, sir.
episodes, who's from near my area. So, where were you in relation to them, and were you part of any of those activities at all, or were you completely separate?
Yeah, so you can imagine there's a lot of things going on simultaneously, and there were several agency teams that were doing a variety of missions. And so you had already interviewed Will Markham. Will
Mhm.
Markham was one of the combat controllers initially that was tasked with the Special Forces Group to break the Taliban's back. And so they were on a line north of Bagram Airfield. Bagram became the main air base. It was the main Soviet air base. It became the main U.S. air base as well. So part of the team was supporting those types of mission. The other team was so the idea of once we made friends with the Northern Alliance, we were quickly trying to sort out. Remember, the whole reason we were there was to locate Al Qaeda, and so some folks may or may not understand this, but we were really on the hunt for Arabs. Al Qaeda, it comes from mainly the Arab countries. We weren't hunting for the Taliban. It just so happens that the Taliban was providing safe comfort, or they were allowing Al Qaeda to operate out of their area. And so for us to get to the business we wanted to do, we had to break the Taliban's back, and that's where Will Markham came into play. Johnny Spann and his team, also part of a Jawbreaker element that was different than mine. Mine was Jawbreaker Juliet. That was a different Jawbreaker team, and that was the call sign for the agency teams. They had got intel about this prison, and the Northern Alliance had captured a lot of Taliban who didn't want to surrender. And an interesting thing in their culture is that they're all cousins, and so if you're a Taliban member and the Northern Alliance gets the advantage and wins the day, then you're allowed to transfer over. You could just say, hey, I forsake the Taliban. I want to be in the Northern Alliance. And just like that, they are Northern Alliance members. Now they're asked to shave their beards. So it's typically hand length on the beards. And so they would have them cut their beards, and they would go from wearing black hats to wearing brown hats. I mean, that's as simple as it is. So at that prison, where they had got intel about an American, that's where the John Walker Lynn piece came in. A misguided young American that ended up getting caught up in the Taliban lore, and ended up getting captured. And then that whole piece, where there was only a couple of Americans, which a large element of Afghans to support them, and then that situation just got out of control very quickly. But I was north and east of that at our initial start, and that's really all I could say about that. I was aware that it happened because we were receiving CIA cable traffic, and we understood that something was going on over there, and so they mobilized forces over there to go quell that uprising.
So then, what
Yeah.
was your mission, and did it get changed, or was it? was the
Certainly.
same all along.
So when we initially departed the U.S., so we had a 6-person team, and we split up into 2 3-person groups.
Were these
Our
all Air Force?
No, this is 2 Air Force guys attached to an advanced force operations team from Delta.
Okay.
And so our mission was to go into Afghanistan and to locate and rescue the Shelter Now International Christian Missionaries, which were 8 missionaries. And as I recall, 2 Americans, 2 Australians, and 4 Germans. And so to me, these are the Delta Force of Christian missionaries, right? So you've done some mission work, Thad, I've read.
Yeah.
And so imagine that your mission is going to be in China or North Korea or Afghanistan. I mean, it sounds ludicrous to me, but when you're led, when you have the calling, you go where you're sent, and they were sent to the Taliban stronghold of Afghanistan.
Wow. Okay.
So they got captured, but thankfully the Taliban, for whatever reason, decided not to martyr them, and then kept them together. And they were
Had they been there, by the way, since before 9/11?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. So they had been there, and they had been receiving Red Crescent visits. That's like our Red Cross. And so I think that there was some, the Afghan culture is rich with trading, and I think the idea was to trade these hostages for riches, and so that's why they kept them going. So there's a book written by Dana Curry and Heather Mercer, the 2 Americans, entitled "Prisoners of Hope," where they describe their circumstances. And so our mission was to locate them. And at the time, we thought they were in Kabul, but at this point, we're in the Panjshir Valley of northern Afghanistan, just across the border from Tajikistan. And we were aligned with the Northern Alliance intelligence teams in our chief of base from the CIA. And our mission initially was to locate them, but then quickly, as we were paying mind to the battlefield, we realized that the fight against the Taliban with Will Markham, and as soon as they fell, that opened the door to Bagram Air Base, and we were quickly scrambled to then leave the Panjshir Valley and drive south, and then occupy Bagram Airfield, which we did immediately. And so we were the first American boots on the ground at Bagram the first night that it was open. So that was pretty interesting. So now we're still collecting information. So some very interesting things is that the Northern Alliance would have regular conversations with the Taliban. It's no different than, you talking to a family member, and then you're not on the best of terms, but you still, trade greetings with them. And so the Northern Alliance was collecting intel from the Taliban, and so the idea was, can we continue to push the Northern Alliance continue to push, and then take Kabul quickly. So I think in the Washington D.C. circles, they thought it would take a long time for all of this for the Taliban to capitulate, but things started happening very rapidly, and just as quickly as we had got to Bagram, just as quickly we got into Kabul almost a couple days later, and then it was honestly the Wild West. Maybe the only person that was in Kabul quicker than us, or we might have beat her, but was Christian Amanpour, the CNN correspondent. And so she was running around with the team as well. So it was really the Wild West. It was Taliban that weren't sure what to do, U.S. forces that were starting to seize the initiative there. Politically, we were interested in opening up our embassy that had been closed since the Soviets had been defeated and the Taliban took over. And so a lot of dynamics going on, Wild West, where you're just making eye contact with people and just trying to figure out their motives while you're trying to to get to your business at hand. And our business was, me from a Air Force combat controller point of view, was to quickly assess the Kabul airport and airfield, so we could talk to our forces about whether they could use that air base to also land airplanes in.
Joe, how did you assess it? Were you checking the quality of the runway?
Yes, and so the idea is that we want to make sure that it's capable of receiving any types of aircraft. And so some of our tactical aircraft can land in all sorts of conditions, very short runways at night, where commercial airliners need lights and they need the entire runway. And so my job was to figure out very quickly whether we could use the entire airfield or parts of it, and then send that information back to the Combined Air Operations Center so they could start to plan to bring in supplies that would support the agency and then follow on U.S. forces.
Was it a paved airstrip?
Yeah, so completely concrete. The issue is that the U.S. had decided to bunker two pieces of the airfield using penetration bombs to destroy big pieces, so that there was gravel all over. Not something that couldn't have been cleaned up very quickly, but the idea is that the airport was closed to commercial traffic until we could get folks in there that could recreate that concrete.
Oh, okay.
To the same standard load-bearing capacity that it was designed. Yep. So at that point, we're in Kabul. This is roughly got into the Panjshir Valley, around October 19th. We're into November. We're starting to get the lay of the land, and we start to hear about the Northern Alliance is using their network to figure out kind of the ground situation for us, the enemy order of battle, as we say, understand what the bad guys are up to. When we find out that the Taliban had given up and become Northern Alliance, but all those Arabs that we were talking about, all of them were captured. So those were the people that were at the prison where Johnny Spann was at. And then they were also in a prison in Kabul, held in the jail. And so some of our folks went and interviewed them and just asked them some questions about what was going on. And that's when we first got our tipper on Osama bin Laden still being in Afghanistan. So we got information that he was located in a place called Tora Bora. We didn't know what that was at the time, but turns out, it took us a while to locate where that was, did some more interviews with the locals, but we found out that it was on the farther south and east of us, almost on the Pakistani border. So from Kabul, just about, due southeast was an area of called Tora Bora. What we didn't know at the time is that is where they had set up when the Soviet occupation had occurred. And some of these same Al-Qaeda fighters were, freedom fighters, as they were described back then. And they were the ones that were receiving U.S. weapons to stop the Soviets and to get the Soviets to quit Afghanistan. And so the Soviets chased them towards the Tora Bora Mountains, but never had the combat power to get that done. And so they thought, by their own testimony that we found out later, is that they thought that they were completely safe in these mountains of Tora Bora. But, we were fresh in mind that September 11th just happened, and we were definitely looking to rout out the people that had conducted those operations. And so this was hot and heavy in our minds. I mean, it was less than, 2 months later that we were, approaching Tora Bora.
So what was your plan then?
So a good question. And so we pushed out to a town called Jalalabad, which was the closest location, and they had some houses back in the day. Surprisingly, even with the Muslim ethos, is that they were allowed to sell heroin because there were poppy fields in abundance in the vicinity of Jalalabad, and they would package it up as heroin, sell it, and then they were able to make money from that. They weren't necessarily using the heroin, but this is the heroin that was making it all the way to the United States. So they were allowed to do that. And so we were at a UN drug eradication house, and then we started to get our plan together. And when we got permission to go and just do a look-see at Tora Bora, and I don't know if you would call it reconnaissance by fire or you would call it movement to contact. But the idea is that myself and 3 other counterparts and then some Afghans would push forward or towards Tora Bora to try to get eyes on, to figure out, who was there and what was going on. So we really had no intel. We hadn't even really flown over the area with a Predator drone yet, or any other aircraft to try to get an idea of, what was happening in that vicinity.
So how did you get there? And what's the elevation of Tora Bora too?
Well, so the mountains are somewhere in the neighborhood of between 8,000 and 11,000 feet. And then so we had traversed over those after we got dropped off by vehicle. So
okay, so you were rocking.
Well, we got inserted by vehicle after we made it through a quote unfriendly checkpoint that was managed by some bad guys. And so at this point, you never quite know who the bad guys are, whether they were Taliban that hadn't give up, whether they were Al Qaeda, or whether they were just bandits. And so we kind of hid in the back of a truck, made it through the checkpoint, got released out of the vehicle, and then proceeded to hump, a military term for throwing the ruck on your back and getting to where you're going, and to bed down for the first night. And then we ended up staying at a local, I don't think warlord is the right term, a local elder, very colorful man, looked like he was 150 years old, just, beaten by the sun and the sand. But he was a true gentleman. We had an interpreter who was a Pakistani gentleman that spoke Urdu, Pashto, as well as Arabic. And so we made communication with that family, and they hosted us. That's an interesting piece, is that I've been all over the world, and I've been to many Islamic countries prior to September 11th. And one of the things I noticed when we're out and about is that the average person in those countries is very compassionate, very friendly, and they've got a credo that a visitor is a guest, and they will do anything anything possible to treat them equally, and that even to protect them as well. And so once you're a guest in somebody's house there, they become your benefactor as far as food and protection. And so we spent the night in the gentleman's house, and he told us a story that out in the fields, his sheep had gotten slaughtered by the bad guys, and some bombings from other locations. And so we assured him that part of us being there was to make that stop happening, so that we can get those bad guys, and that he could live freely, without their subjugation. And so from that point, we set a plan. We knew where we wanted to go. We knew where we thought the Al Qaeda forces were. We had no idea really what we were walking into, but we just through cover of darkness, we had night vision goggles, and we just proceeded to move forward. And the Afghans kind of got us into place. But as far as they were willing to take us was 8 kilometers from the front line. And for us, that 8 kilometers is roughly, a mile is, so 8 kilometers is roughly 4.8 miles, is what I'm trying to say. So we're roughly 5 miles from where we need to be. We are trained and equipped to get right up next to the enemy and then do our business, preferably in the cover of darkness, where we excel. And so they wouldn't take us any farther, and we said, well, we have to keep on going. And so they reluctantly continued us forward until we got
the truck.
I know we're still on foot.
Okay.
Yeah.
How big is your team? How many of you is this?
So there's 4 Americans at this point, and roughly 8 Afghans. Then that got pared down to 4 Afghans. And so we were a force of 8 total, with us leading the way, unsure about anything about mines, about what we were walking into, and walked right up to a hornet's nest of activity, troops. So we sat down into what we call an observation post, an OP. Some of your guests might have talked about that previously. And so the idea is kind of a look and listen location. So you're in a safe location, defensible against attackers. And we started to get a lay of the land. And then the more we looked that night, the more we figured out that we were amongst tens, hundreds, and then potentially 1,000 troops had bed down on all of these fingers of these mountains in a place called Tora Bora. That was an elaborate cave system as well, that I think Newsweek had done some stories about prior to us even getting to Afghanistan. The stories were like, this is why the U.S. forces can't succeed, because they've had so much time to dig in, and this is how well they did against the Soviets, and whatever. So that's how we got to Tora Bora in short order. Still keeping in the back of our mind that at some point here, somebody's going to have to rescue these Christian missionaries. but our mission had changed drastically.
So, Joe, at this point, are you wearing multicams?
Nope, no, sir. I'm still wearing civilian clothes.
Wow. Okay.
The Afghans are wearing civilian clothes. So it's myself, my Delta counterpart, a CIA counterpart, and then another counterpart. We're all wearing civilian clothes, all carrying, foreign weapons, and trying to blend in as best we can so that we don't look as. I was definitely whiter than most of our hosts that were, browner in skin, just from being out in the sun more.
So you don't have any of the big radios and the big antennas on your back?
No, I had in my rucksack, I had what would be called a big radio at the time. So it was a radio that could transmit. I could talk to the satellites. I could talk to the aircraft. I could talk to my teammates. And then, so I had one large radio and then one smaller radio.
Okay.
That has almost the same capability, but just not as strong in transmission power.
Okay. And what about food and water?
Good question. And so I'll take us back a little bit. So at the time we were in the safe house in Jalalabad, and the question was posed, hey, can we go forward and do this, we the US? And so the chief of base from the agency asked the question. And at the time, the 5th Special Forces Group had shown up as well. Now they're in uniform. They are US forces. They are bound by the Geneva Convention. My group is now bound under intelligence rules, not military rules, based on what we would call a detail. So we went from Title 10, which is U.S. forces, to Title 50, which is intelligence forces, intelligence assets. And so if we were doing this against a regular power that had a regular government, then we would, if captured, we would be considered spies versus being, military soldiers. And so, but for us, considering we're in Afghanistan, a country that really doesn't have a government, it just for our care and feeding was taken care of by the agency, and so we abided by their rules. So this was an agency-led op. They asked the 5th Special Forces Group if they could do this mission, and no disrespect to them, but they said, look, you really don't have enough information. We don't have an idea what we're walking into, and and our job is not to walk in and to get killed. Then they looked over at us and asked us, isn't this what you guys do? And we were like, well, yes, we do. And he was like, okay, great, go prosecute the mission. So we quickly drew up a fire support plan, and that's when that whole, we proceeded forward by truck and then by foot. But because we didn't know what we were walking into, all I had was one meal ready to eat, and then one quart Nalgene bottle of water, like one of these bottles right here. I don't know if I can, one of these Nalgene. That's pretty common. So that's all I had. So I had, a quart of water and one meal. And we thought we were just going to go in one cover of darkness, see what we saw, and then come back and then figure out what we were going to do from there. What ended up happening was as we described the military situation of the enemy, their enemy order of battle, everybody, including the agency at the safe house, as well as their reports back to the White House, everybody got really excited and decided that we needed to start doing the business. And so they said, we want you to commence combat operations. And so I enacted.
And this was just to kill all the people around?
Yes. Yeah, that was it. Commence to killing them, and then we'll figure it out as we go. And so we were arrayed against, so we were north of the enemy that was pushed between us and the Pakistani border. And that radio that I had, so on satellite communications, I would be able to talk to the AWACS, and AWACS is an airborne warning and command and control center. And so that's filled with coalition Air Force folk that are whose major mission is to receive the other aircraft, the fighter and bomber aircraft that would be coming in to support us in our mission. And so we established our position with the AWACS, established our call sign, established what we were about to start to do, and they started to task order aircraft into us. So initially I had no idea. If you would have asked me that day how long did I think I was going to be out there? I would have said, okay, this evening before they send follow-on forces. And then how long do I think I would do this for? And I'm like, I don't even know. One mission, 1 hour. And so we received our first fighter aircraft, which was an F-14 from an aircraft carrier somewhere in the Arabian Sea that I'm sure had to in-flight refuel several times just to get to us. So long mission for them. Already, a night for us trying to get in there. And the closest observation post was three Al Qaeda types that were on a hill that was higher than us, and so we didn't like that. And so that was our first mission, and then controlled a 1,000-pound bomb right onto that position. Which then, I'll be honest with you, that was my first combat operation doing close air support against an adversary. Prior to that, it had just been training, but everything went as trained. We were highly trained as part of those component training cycles and pre-alert cycles and alert cycles. This is something that we did all the time. And so we dropped that first bomb. It was right on target, destroyed that enemy observation post. And then over the next roughly 12 hours, we continued to drop bombs from an array of aircraft, Air Force and Navy aircraft, and commenced destroying those forces in place, which made it very easy for us because we had night vision and they did not. And so they didn't really have an idea what was happening other than, bombs were raining down on them and very accurately. And so a plane would come in. They would tell me their playtime, meaning, look, I got about 15 minutes of gas. I got two GBU-10s, which are 2,000-pound bombs that are laser guided. We had laser guided, we had laser target designators that could guide those bombs to the target. And then our job is to talk the aircraft into position. So when they release that bomb, it has the physics ability to make it to the target. And so that's partly my responsibility, partly their responsibility. Part of my responsibility is to make sure that friendly fire never occurs. So fratricide, is a horrible thing. Way too far away from home, took way too long to get there to have a bomb dropped on our position, and then our own bomb hitting us. And so that's what we're focused on. So on this one radio, I'm talking to AWACS, I'm talking to the fighters, I'm talking back to the safe house. We're basically sending pictures via what was then a rudimentary modem. We would send the pictures back. And then we thought as we approached daylight that we'd be finished. And they said, no, keep on going. So we want you to continue this. And so we did.
I got to jump in here for a minute.
All right. Yeah, sorry, I've been talking.
This is really good. The targets that you're hitting, can you help me understand, are these like small encampments? Are they small villages? About how many people are you destroying with one bomb?
Great question. So depending on the location, an observation post was just enemy observation post was just something that they had some high ground that they put some rocks around so they could be protected from small arms fire. So that was one example. Another example is a small village where they've made houses out of rocks. They just stacked up rocks like the Flintstones until they got a couple of homes made there. And then for most of them, they would dig a hole into the ground and then put a little piece of canvas covering over it or some sort of cover so they could stay in the hole and be hidden, which would also save them from small arms fire. There was also caves that were there. And then sometimes they would be in the open. So they would just be laying out on top of the dirt and rocks, and that was their little camp. So depending on who they were, and at the time we didn't know exactly who we were dealing with, but as time went on, we started to get a better picture of exactly who we were fighting.
So since the war hadn't really started yet, what were they doing? What was their role? Were they just guarding their area or what?
Yes, and so that Tora Bora area is that was previously, like we had talked about, where they had fallen back when the Soviets had invaded. Well, when the Americans had crashed through Bagram and then crashed into Kabul, all the Al Qaeda that didn't get captured and thrown in jail in Kabul had fallen to this location to wait orders from their leader, who was Osama bin Laden.
Okay, Joe, that's good. And so one more question.
Sure.
Were you said the first aircraft was an F-14.
Yes.
Did you early on, did you request a specific aircraft? And if you didn't, did you get to the point where you requested certain aircraft?
Yes. And so every aircraft that would show up, and we had F-14s, we had F-18s, we had F-15s, we had F-16s, we had the B-1 bomber, we had the B-52 bomber, and we had the MC-130. A little bit later, after my mission, was when the AC-130, which is the workhorse. That's the Jolly Green Giant from Vietnam era fame, where that thing has got a couple of 40 millimeter Bofors cannons, maybe a 25 millimeter Gatling gun or two 20 millimeter Gatling guns, and then a 105 millimeter howitzer cannon on it. And so that, as my mission ended, which we'll get to, then other combat controllers with their units had then, as far as we could push, they had then taken it to the next level there. But for me, every aircraft would show up with a different mix of armament. And so when they would do their check-in, that's when they would tell me, look, I've got, I'm a B-52 bomber. I've got 45 Mark 82s, which are 45 500-pound dumb bombs, but they are deadly accurate with those bombs from very high altitude. And so they could release those. The B-1 bomber would have joint direct attack munitions. Those were very valuable because they had three fuse types. And so one was air burst. The versions escape me now, but there was version 1, 2, and 3. One was air burst, one was point detonation, and then one was delayed fuse. And so if they were dug into the cave, I would use the delayed fuse because that thing would burrow through rock before it exploded. If they were in the open, I would use the air burst to try to get more shrapnel onto them. And then if they were in a vehicle, because they, believe it or not, even though it was high up in the mountains, they did have tanks and BMPs, their armored personnel carriers. And then so we would use point detonation for that. And so over trying to answer your question about how many, and so after you completed each fire mission, and so the aircraft would drop its ordnance, if they had the legs, they would come back around for a reattack. And then you would thank them and give them a battle damage assessment, which was roughly how many enemy KIA or what other things were killed. The enemy had mules with them, and unfortunately the mules perished as well because they were just in proximity. But they would have vehicles or tanks or the like, and so I would wrap up that mission, and then they would head out and get handed back to the AWACS and then back to wherever they came from, whether it was ground based or sea based. And so when it was all said and done, that number was north of 300 total enemy KIA. Rough order of magnitude. It really was a hornet's nest of activity. And I will say one thing about them is that on the first day, when we started to crush them, they never fled. They never ran. They just stood there and took it like they were angry. Like that was that's what they were supposed to do. And over part of this story is that we controlled close air support for 65 of the first 72 hours. And those hours where we weren't controlling close air support, we were either moving or refitting and rekitting. And so honestly, I was there for just over 5 straight days. Never finished that one meal ready to eat, though I did get resupplied with water. And so water was an integral piece.
What about sleep?
I got 1 hour of sleep in 5 days, and I will tell you that never really got tired. I mean, just the adrenaline was very high. Again, this was right after September 11th. They, we were doing the business. We had found them. We caught them. Basically caught them flat-footed. And the orders from higher were do not stop, do not relent, continue driving forward. And so we would clear an area and then spring forward about 1 kilometer, roughly 0.6 miles or so. Do it again. We did that over 4 consecutive days before we got help. And so we couldn't quit. There was no we just couldn't do it.
Are you climbing up and down at this point?
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah. So the idea is that you find a good spot where you can't be seen. Now the odd thing is that we did this, roughly over 5 days, and that meant that we were doing this day and night. And so I thought for sure that we would do this by night, and then we would hide during the day, and then restart it the next night. And the orders were, no, you will continue this fight. And I will tell you some interesting things. Is that we're talking about December, between 8 and 11,000 feet in elevation. It was cold. And the batteries that we had then, which may be the same batteries that the men are using today, but the batteries wouldn't last long, and we didn't have a lot of batteries with us. And I will tell you something, Thad, that my single battery over 5 days never failed me. I'd never seen anything like it in my entire life. Over years of training, I would jump in with the Rangers to seize an airfield, and the battery would be dead like within 5 minutes. And then we all carried them. And so, big batteries, the thing weighed, 5 pounds. My battery never relented.
Wow.
I don't understand it. And so odd things like that. I mean, there's several things where I could think of where, I felt I had, a hedge of protection around me, that I was doing well, I'm not going to, I don't know. I just felt like I was well protected.
Yeah. All right, Joe. So you're being told you can't stop day and night. You got to go. So why and
stop.
how high up was this mission going to?
So we were being briefed. So as we're talking back to the safe house, we're being told that this mission is being briefed at the White House. Like the president is in the ready room, and I don't know that they can see what's happening, but they've got the ability to put our calls on the mic in there. And so we were like, okay, well, there you go. This is at the highest level. Previously, we had been given a message about the 2 Americans that Shelter Now International Christian Missionaries. We had been given a message that said, this is directly from the president, George W. Bush. He said, you are not allowed to just rescue the Americans. You must rescue all 8 of them. And we were like, yes, sir. We got that. We understand that. Then we were told that the White House was monitoring our mission for this. And so we continued to fight. At this point, the 5th Special Forces Group wanted to get engaged. So they understood the battlefield better. And a combat controller friend of mine named Bill was across the valley from me. Him and the 5th Special Forces Group came in, and we split the valley in half. And so I had like the west side, he had the east side, and then we started to control fires together. And then relief was coming for me from behind on my side. And then on or about the 5th day is when we finished our business, and then we're heading back, and then we're relieved by other U.S. forces.
One thing that you said in this article on Task and Purpose is my heart was pounding. I can see the AQ guys right out in front of us. I cleared them hot, and the bomb dropped right in the position. Can you just give us a little glimpse more of some of the thoughts and feelings you had as you're performing your job?
Sure. It's so here I am 22 years later. So, most of that stuff I'd forgotten about, and so maybe the bravado flows a little bit better right now than then. But the pressure that we're part of an agency team, that I'm the Air Force combat controller. I'm with some of the most elite soldiers in the history of warfare. And now it's my turn to do my job. And here we are. And I've been on training missions where the aircraft can't see what you're lasing. They're dropping bombs way off target. And this one, so I'm pretty nervous. I know that if we miss the first target, that there's a chance that they get a radio report out that we're there, and that they could start to look for us. So I'm worried about that. And so I've got a little personal ego going on. I've got making sure that everything is tight, that the coordinates are good, that there's no chance that there's friendly fire. And so when I gave that cleared hot call on that first mission, yes, my heart was pounding. I was like, oh my goodness, this is it. We are kicking this thing off against the people that tried to kill 50,000 New Yorkers on 9/11. And so, yeah, it was very, I was amped up. It was very exciting. That F-14 pilot put that bomb right on target. And it was like, okay, everything checks out. We're good to go. And never had an issue from that point on.
Did you ever have a feeling of gratitude saying, I am so thankful I'm able to be here now and do this?
Yeah, there's no doubt. And so, when I talk to students and others about how this works, and over my time, at this point, I'm 36 years old, 18 years time in service. I've been training with the most elite forces in the world for years they have done missions across the globe. And so you're daily working with people that hold you to account, that are the best of the best people in the world. You strive so that you can match them every day. And so you're with a smaller group that has better training, more lethality, more capability, more autonomy than any forces in history. And so was very thankful to be amongst them. I was the right guy at the right place at the right time, but any of my peers would have did the same things that I did, and probably better. I mean, the book Alone at Dawn is about my teammate, John Chapman, who gave his life and subsequently received the Medal of Honor later. But that man was a true stud, a true hero. I mean, a true humanitarian family man. I mean, he wasn't Jesus' dad, but I mean, he was on the way. He was a good dude. He was an all around good dude. And so those were the type of people that I was honored to have served with.
I asked the author of Alone at Dawn, or one of them, Dan Schilling. I asked him. So let me read this statement here about this mission of yours. And the tonnage, more than twice that of the Statue of Liberty, still stands as the most dropped by a single CCT or anyone else during an engagement in the history of airborne warfare. And so Dan Schilling said that in his book Alone at Dawn. I read Alone at Dawn when it came out several years ago, and I had Dan on the show to talk about it. I don't remember that part. I don't remember him talking about this mission. So I haven't even gone back and checked that yet. But anyway, I emailed Dan last month and I said, to the best of your knowledge, is that still true? And he said, as far as I know, I think it's true, still true. Do you think so, Joe?
Yeah, it's close. When Dan was writing the book Alone at Dawn, again about John Chapman and combat control, he asked out, he kind of sent out a query, and I said probably just on the number of consecutive days of doing it, it had to have been probably Will Markham or myself, and so the fact is I had, when we talked about, we had a log book of every aircraft that came through, what they dropped, what the enemy, KA was or equipment. And so that's an artifact. That's that's part of my after action report. And so that's where we get that number from. And so we polled the group and just asked around, and nobody else, said that they dropped anything close to that. And so I think that could still be a record. I mean,
so your number is 688,000 pounds. Is
yes.
that right?
Okay. Yeah, in a variety of ordnance, and then 20 Mike gun runs and some other cluster munitions and the like. Yeah.
Wow, this is intense. I mean, I am just captivated. What else, Joe? What else do you want to say about it? And then I want to talk a little bit about after the fact too.
Sure. So what I want to say is there was a couple of things. I just the theme of, just prior to leaving the safe house in Jalalabad, I'm a Christian man like yourself, Thad, and I didn't bring a Bible because I knew I was going into Afghanistan, and I knew that would probably be an issue. And so I had said a prayer, and believe it or not, when the 5th Special Forces Group showed up at our safe house, a guy lays his gear down next to mine and pulls out this Bible with a tactical cover on it. It's like a camouflage cover. And I said, "Hey, buddy, you're not going to believe this, but 2 days ago, I said a prayer that I wish I had a chance to look at a Bible." And he's like, "Here you go." So I was able to go through and look at some of my favorite scripture before I left, to try to ground myself, for what was about to occur. So that was a significant moment for me. We kept up the fight as long as we could do it before we handed off to other U.S. forces. I got called back to go back to the Pentagon to back brief about what we had done. Got asked by a general, why we didn't try harder, why we didn't push harder. And I was like, hey, sir, it was like, four of us against, the Afghans had left us. It was four Americans against, we still don't know the total number that we were arrayed against, but every one of those hills was a different nationality. So one was a Yemeni hill, a Saudi hill, an Egyptian hill, a Chechen hill, so each one, so they stuck with their own folks, and we systematically destroyed as much as we could. Following up from us, in the book talks about the fact that we got to within 1.8 kilometers of Osama bin Laden's transmitter. We had been hitting them so hard to the point where the cave system, the air ducts that were coming out of the mountain were spitting fire. So the entire cave was eviscerated in flames. I mean, we were pushing them so hard. And I guess Osama bin Laden, before he departed, transmitted an apology to his forces saying, I never thought the Americans would come here. I didn't plan for you to die here in a place like this, but I'll catch you on the backside. And then he departed. And then we fell back. And so that was pretty much the end of my initial foray. Other U.S. forces, Navy SEAL teams subsequently rescued the Shelter Now International Christian Missionaries. They were all safe and healthy. And there's combat controllers and pararescuemen on that mission that saved them. And so that was kind of awesome that mission happened as well. And so some of my teammates from the 24th that were on that with SEAL Team 6. And so that was pretty cool. Come to find out, I thought for sure we had buried bin Laden in the caves there, but I guess he got out. At least that's what they're telling me, or the Navy SEALs are telling me. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh man. So Joe, this sounds like you were very busy. It was very intense. Was there ever any split seconds or any moments where you kind of thought, well, my wife and kids are home living their life, comfortable, or hey, my buddies are back home, they're going to work, they're playing golf, and here I am dropping bombs on the United States' biggest enemies.
Yeah. It was simultaneously an honor that I was that far forward doing the nation's business, at the time, trying to eradicate Al-Qaeda to the best we could. So I was honored. Later, absorbing it, and what's interesting is I occasionally speak to a leadership vignette at the Air Force Academy for wrestlers that come for summer camp. And some of these kids, they're very, I have no doubt about the quality of their generation because I see these young men that are solid. But I've been asked a question a couple times, did what I did, how do I deal with that from my Christian faith point of view? And so I did what I was trained and equipped to do, and it was the right thing to do. I didn't violate any ethos of warfare. Did the business to the best of my ability, and then when I meet my maker, he'll let me know whether I was a good and faithful servant or not. So that kind of rounds my deal out. Everything I had learned in combat control, air traffic control wise, we used air traffic control principles to stack aircraft up. At one point, I had 22 separate airplanes that were above me.
Wow.
And it was, and everybody was, because at the time there was a friendly fire accident that had happened in country. So every aircraft was coming to our call sign, and they knew the gravity of the mission, and they knew the mission was, it was a good one, that it was, they would be hitting targets that were very worthwhile.
Have you had any guilt at all or regrets?
No, I've asked for forgiveness. Clearly this is a war of the worlds kind of thing. They came to America and punched us while we were sleeping. And then, so we just returned the favor. So I think, if I'm, again, 22 years later, there's a lot I think about, but the things I think about are more of, of my teammates and what they went through, the losses that we have, faced, your family, unfortunately being on the end of that as well. And so I am, John Chapman, my teammate, his sister is the co-author of Alone at Dawn, and I see them regularly, and I I see her and I see their mother, and so that's a blessing for me. Is that I get to hang on there. I still see my teammates regularly. You had mentioned, you went to the first Combat Control Foundation event in Odessa, Texas. I went to the second one year later. We had Rip there, the same deal. So it was just I had missed you by a year.
I got to tell you that Rip Wheeler, man, he brings a crowd and he brings
Yes,
some
he did.
money.
Yeah, as I recall, he auctioned a shirt from the show from Yellowstone for over $100,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my
And then you said,
gosh.
I think you were talking about Rowdy Reigns as well, so it was all the same, same customers that were there,
Yeah.
and they were just treated us like aces. And it's good for me that I get to hang out with my partners from the day. That keeps me sane and that keeps me in check and it keeps me accountable.
Is there anything, Joe, that's maybe was printed in the article, Task and Purpose, or that has been said that is incorrect that you'd like to, clarify or add to?
Well, no, I mean we had decided to do the Task and Purpose article because we are going to honor the 20th anniversary of U.S. forces in Afghanistan. So me on the front end, and then others still keeping up the fight 20 years later, a career later, guys that had joined, and 20 years later, here we were, and just as we had completed the interview is when the administration decided to pull out of Afghanistan, and so that ended very abruptly, and so the article didn't have the same punch of what we thought it was going to do. So it kind of, for me, it's a little awkward. I feel like I'm, bragging about what I've done. On one hand, I'm thankful because my kids, kind of know what I did, as part of this awesome joint task force. On the other hand, I think I've received too much recognition for, a mission, but because there's so many combat controllers and special tactics folks that are continuing to do this business and are leading the nation, working with the best, best special operations force in the world, and will continue to prove their value as we face new enemies, maybe more first world enemies, near peer kind of activities.
Yeah. One other question that could just back to the battle, Joe. Were there any pilots that questioned you ever? Say, hey, are
No,
you sure that's clear? Something
no.
like
As a
that.
matter of fact, two real quick stories. The first B-52 bombs. I had never worked with a B-52 in training, and they're dropping the bombs from tens of thousands of feet up, and they're dumb bombs. And I'm like, look, I've never even worked with you guys. And so we went from we were always taught, abbreviated call, Alpha 1 Bravo. This is Charlie 2 Delta, over. Yeah, send it. It's like, hey, fire mission from my position marked by this, this many meters at this azimuth kind of thing. Well, at this point, we got into a kind of a phone call. I'm like, hey, you're going to have to convince me that this is the right thing to do, because I'm out here. I just can't, I can't afford to hurt the team or myself. And they were like, hey, so the first mission was, some guys that got into a hill adjacent to us, above us. And he was the only thing that I had on station at the time. So I needed him because we can't, four of us can't do very well in a gunfight, at least not for long. And so he's like, look, let these numbers are tight. We got it. And so they dropped these bombs and they landed right on target. I'm like, all right, now we're doing business. Right. So they kind of talked me into it, and they proved their value.
Wow.
For close air support versus, strategic bombing. And then the other piece was I had one pilot that kept on wanting to overfly our position, which we can't have, because if they drop the bomb short, then it could potentially hit us. So we have them fly, so we can observe their angle of attack. And I had to turn him off because he was a danger to us. And so I had to abort that mission. Came around, same thing, and I gave them a return to base. So they left their base or their carrier with bombs, and they had to return with them, because they couldn't follow the instructions. And so I was chided a little bit later on that, after the mission was over. But
Were
I
they
was
ticked?
I was the ground forces commander, and so I had the authority to make that call. So yeah, I just too far away from home, and didn't want to die by by our own team.
What else? Anything else you would like to say, Joe?
Yeah, I think when it was all said and done, we did it. At the end, I've been asked, what did I think about the withdrawal? That came up in the article, but then didn't make it because, it just, we were just steamrolled by everything else that was happening there. It's hard for me to say that the losses that we suffered, which were major because we're such a small force overall. I mean, you're talking about the low number of hundreds of these qualified dudes, and any one of our losses is awful. But in our community, it's exponential. And was it worth it? Did we do the right thing? And my answer is yes. We are the right team to bring this fight to the bad guys in the beginning. And what happened after that is well above our pay grades. And we continued to do that business for 2 decades. I'm thankful to my brothers. I'm thankful for those that learned from what we did and made it better, and they became more lethal. And now they're using all sorts of other technologies so they could see the terrain better and make better decisions, safer decisions. So I'll leave that to the politicians. But I miss our brothers that aren't with us right now. But every year, we celebrate them at our reunion, and thankful to have grown up in this way, because it is, honestly, this brotherhood is what keeps me going. It keeps me level.
Yeah, this has been incredible, and there's something else that I'm very interested in, and very few people will be interested in this, but I'm a gear guy and a clothing guy. 5 days. You weren't planning on being out that long. You said civilian clothing. Will you just tell me what kind of clothing you're actually wearing and shoes? And then did you ever change? Because it sounds like you didn't.
Never. I never went to the bathroom. So no, the clothing never came off, never took my boots off. That 1 hour of sleep that I got, I was promptly awakened to say, hey, there's a fighter, checking in. We got, they have a target they heard about. And so, the clothing was here's an odd thing, is that, so we're running around with high-tech fabrics underneath. We've got a lot of resources. Our Afghan hosts were running around in basically light cotton in plastic shoes, and so they were having no problem climbing these hills. And so damn sure we would never have a problem, climbing those hills either. But just regular boots. Some guys had Danner boots. Some guys had some type of Protect stuff. I was thankful I had boots because it was chilly. And that I'll send you I think the picture of us is in Alone at Dawn at the end of the mission. That's the clothes we were wearing. Yeah, nobody ever changed clothes.
Okay. Did you have any cotton yourself? Cotton socks, cotton shirt, anything?
No. So I grew up learning that cotton will kill you.
Yeah.
And so the underlying garments were all like polypropylene, and at the time Capilene, I think, was the big one. So I had the long john pants on underneath my my jeans.
Okay. So interesting. This is fantastic. Anything else, Joe?
No. It's like I thankful that we got connected, you and I. Definitely would want to invite you out to our reunion. Would love for you to come out to get to know you in person. And then you probably bump into a lot of guys that you've either met through your podcast or in person, rekindle some old friendships there. You're welcome to come out to Las Vegas. And I'm very impressed with what you're doing. These podcasts are exhilarating. I mean, it gets you're doing a variety of interviews with folks, like we were talking about the Medal of Honor winner from Iwo Jima. I mean, that's so awesome that you got to interview him. He was so humble. Tremendous work that he did. Yeah, so it's very nice. I hope it soothes your soul to be able to do this as well. And it's an honor for me to have been asked to get on with you in this podcast.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for being on and for what you've done to serve our country and to sacrifice so much, and your family's sacrifice. And man, I just thanks for telling the story and for I guess being open about it. And I definitely want to get out there. I would love to come this year. I think it's in April.
It is right at the end of April. Yeah, you and I will continue to communicate, and I'll make sure that you've got the VIP invite. You'll meet hundreds of combat controllers and their peers and families that span all the way back from pre-Vietnam all the way to today's
That'd
group.
be great. And maybe I can get some more interviews too. That if
well,
they're
heck,
willing, that'd be great.
It'd be an interview factory.
Well, hey, this has been a very, very fast hour. I really appreciate you being on, and I can't wait to get this released. On a day when, by the way, my phone is blowing up because of the retirement of Nick Saban, which was announced today. We're recording this on January 10th.
Yep.
And part of it's one of my brothers, and I think he will not be sleeping tonight. So anyway, that's what's going on over here.
I'm glad you continue to do this podcast, because I know that's a big deal.
Yep. Well, thank you, sir. God bless you. Thank you for being a warrior for God and country.
Well, certainly. God bless you and your family.
Thanks for listening to Patriot to the Core. If you enjoyed this one, will you rate and review it on Apple Podcast and/or Spotify? If you'll hit subscribe or follow, or that little plus symbol in Spotify and Apple Podcast, you'll automatically see each new episode in the Your Episodes of Your Library section. And one more thing, if you watched on YouTube, please subscribe to my channel and like this video. And feel free to leave a comment too. Oh yeah, and supporting this podcast helps support the Mark Forrester Foundation, where we provide college scholarships to high school seniors from Haleyville High School. And when we have enough funds, we donate to other worthy causes too that support our military, veterans, and first responders. That's it. Thank you for the support. Until next time.